guys feeling this morning?
Whew.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Alice is tired.
I'm tired. I'm jet lagged. I got it.
We're awake.
I got it. Brain cells activated. It's good.
And how's the audience feeling this morning? How are you guys feeling? Good?
Good.
Awesome.
Oh my God, packed house.
Yeah. Shout out to the Keystone holders.
We're just super excited to have you guys here. The Vogue Snapchat Redefining the Body, curated by Edward Enninful, is such a melding of fashion and tech. And that's exactly what we're here to kind of talk about fashion and tech, to talk about the ways AR is changing the way that we experience fashion, the way that we shop, and just our lives in general. So just to give you a little Q&A for me, my name is Rajni Jacques. I'm the global head of fashion and beauty partnerships at Snap. And I have these badass women who are taking up space in the tech world. And these are the women that not only will you learn from, and especially in this talk, but that you'll get so much knowledge from when it comes to fashion and tech. So let's just start with Miss Alice. And so Alice is one of the pioneers when it comes to kind of like fashion and tech. She's kind of been in the technical tipping point. And she's a founder and CEO of Selby, a blockchain-enabled fashion platform. And formerly of Ralph Lauren, formerly of Burberry. And I think you guys are going to learn so much from her. And then we have Charli over here, who's also this digital fashion designer, really started first in the physical space, Forbes 30 under 30. You also have kind of, her Web3 wearable link, Restless. And Charli has really, really been a pioneer when it comes to AR. Truly a pioneer when it comes to really melding fashion and tech together. And then we have Selby over here, who Selby actually used to be at Snap. And used to be the fashion and beauty partnerships director at Snap. So Selby is very, very familiar with fashion. She comes from a very lucrative fashion background at Condé Nast. And again, just all of us talking together will really, really help to kind of shape, again, fashion and tech. So I think before we even start about talking about the future of fashion, I think we need to really understand, and it's imperative to understand the past and the history of fashion. So I know, Alice, you had mentioned that you and Selby had a conversation where you kind of felt that, okay, this is a tipping point when it comes to fashion. Can you give us a little bit of insight of the conversation and lead us into the conversation of?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Selby and I first met when she was just joining Snap. And I had just joined Ralph Lauren at the time, and I'd come from Burberry. And there's a few former colleagues here at Burberry, which are really amazing to see, because at Burberry, we were so double down on digital and the intersection of digital and fashion. Mm-hmm. So things like working with Snap for augmented reality, try-on. I think we did one of the first in terms of clothing for that. Augmented reality and virtual reality experiences around collections, kind of adding depth to the storytelling that the designers had around specific clothing and products. So it was super, super exciting. And I was moving to Ralph, and Selby was moving to Snap, and we met and totally got on, had an amazing time. And we were kind of thinking about what we do together and how Snap and Ralph Lauren partners. And so there was a meeting where we were discussing different forms of innovation and partnership. And Snap at the time, and still does, own the largest avatar ecosystem in the world, Bitmoji. Right? And if you think about the history of expression and how people have evolved from, the way we talk, the way we communicate with emojis, memojis, and now the kind of these virtual and immersive worlds that people are having, digital identities within. Bitmoji was kind of the perfect example for that. And we kind of thought, well, wow, what about Ralph Lauren kind of creating and designing the first wardrobe for Bitmoji? So there was a conversation, we jumped to it. And honestly, it was a phenomenal thing to do personally in Ralph Lauren, because kind of going along that journey and, working with the designers and Ralph to say, how does your product materialize in a world like this? What does it mean? And we kind of jumped right in and experimented, designed the collection. And, I think, a few months later, there's tens of millions of Bitmojis wearing Ralph Lauren, billions of try-ons. And I think for me personally, and I think Selby, when we were chatting, that was a proof of concept. People do want to express themselves through fashion in digital environments. And that was in like 2019, I think, or 2020.
Same.
Yeah. And here we are today.
The before times of the pandemic.
Yes, yeah. Before the pandemic.
And Selby, can you kind of give us like even more insight? Because I know that you came from the magazine world, and there was a shift when it comes to publications, when it came to kind of just the media landscape. When did that start to change? When did you see the shift from kind of that traditional fashion background to, tech kind of really ruling and digital ruling?
I am so happy to be on this panel. I could literally, as you're asking this question, I was like, how long do you all have? Because I could tell you about every conversation I've had with Alice. It's actually amazing to think. I think a lot of times we think that we talk about digital fashion, Web3, AR. It really feels like the future. It feels like we are on the brink of seeing how this technology can be used, conversations first starting. And I actually I worked at Snap when I woke up one day and realized this is what Snap has been doing this whole time. Yeah. And what Alice is saying, so you meet amazing people. So much of honestly, the money that comes in digital fashion feels speculative in this kind of technology. Alice is one of the few people, and Snap is one of the few platforms that I was like, oh, this work has been done for years. Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to say this, but Alice is one of the few people who I met, and she said, oh yeah, I've done this partnership, this platform, this initiative, and has led to billions of try-ons, billions of expressions. And I was like, oh, we're at the beginning, but there is somebody here who's proved it. And there's a platform here that already, Snap didn't start out years ago and say we're going into digital fashion or we're going into, Web3 or it's not that. But the idea that people were already using technology to be incredibly creative and that there is a differentiation in that technology that is, I think, really embraced by creatives is something in a way you can kind of just open your eyes to and see that people are already doing. It just takes that moment of saying, it's like Burberry doing it. It's like Ralph Lauren doing it. People have actually jumped in, and now it's just coming to a new level.
And that's the thing. I feel like, as of late, it seems new, but it's not. This is something that we've been working at. Snap has been working at. Charli, you started in the physical realm, but now you're kind of doing these, Web3, digital products. So can you kind of tell me what are you excited for when it comes to this? Because you've been working on this for so long. What are you excited for? What gets you going to create?
So my experience within the fashion industry has always been very much colored by internet culture. I started my first brand in 2004 when I was 14. The lookbook was on MySpace. My first customers were in fashion forums. And when I started the Charli Cohen brand in 2012, we had QR codes on my graduate collection. Very much, my experience, of coming of age in the Web 2 social media era and the Tumblr era was that my digital identity really counted for as much as my physical identity. So being able to explore that through physical collections and kind of bring this digital storytelling around the physical collections was really important. We started working with AR in 2016 to be able to start kind of building these immersive story world experiences around physical collections that could be, because we were doing London Fashion Week from, maybe 2013, 2014, and to be able to actually open up an experience to our real customer base who definitely weren't coming to those shows was really, really exciting. So I think that was the first moment where I started to really become obsessed with this potential of immersive. And then from there, we started working with the gaming industry, exploring direct to avatar. And then Snap actually invested in the Charli Cohen brand in 2020. So we got to start playing around with unreleased AR tech. And, we did a collaboration with Assassin's Creed and Snap in 2020 as well, kind of having this very multifaceted fashion experience, whether it was in the physical world, there were AR elements overlaid on the physical collection, and there were also in-game digital collectibles. So I think what I'm excited about is that this stuff that's been kind of bubbling up since, the MySpace days of digital identity is really starting to have the tech to support it for, I guess, amazing opportunity to create and self-express.
And then, touching upon AR, as I said, AR is making fashion more accessible. AR is making fashion more fun. You can try things on before you even buy. So that was really kind of, creating kind of an ecosystem where it's for all. How is technology making fashion industry more accessible? Not just AR, but how is it making it more accessible? Because I think sometimes, Selby, you had mentioned, we throw out words, but what is the true crux of it making it accessible?
I think there are two parts to it. So one is for the consumer. Tech is allowing the consumer to actually become a co-creator with the brand, whether that's co-creating the community and the brand world, or actually co-creating from a design perspective, which is what Web3 really helps to facilitate. So you can start remixing and working over the top of other designs, and all the licensing and royalties around that is managed. So, in that sense, it really kind of starts to remove the line between the brands and the consumers. And then the other piece, I think, is just how accessible creativity becomes. So, everyone is fundamentally creative. Not everyone has the opportunity to explore that in a career. And not everybody, like, for example, I am a terrible illustrator, which when I was doing fashion design at uni, doesn't matter that I was a reasonable designer. If I couldn't express it through illustration, it made it really hard to communicate those designs. Now, being able to use something like AI to be able to quickly render out concepts that I can have to support my tech packs and technical drawings, it's a real game changer. And for non-professional creatives, being able to explore creativity in these really accessible ways that don't rely on formal art training is really incredible. I think only a good thing.
And also, I think, not to interrupt, but I don't know if people really realize how expensive it is to be a fashion designer. It's nearly impossible. I always think that anybody who can launch a label has completely defied the odds of the universe. The capital that you need to produce work, to make samples, to actually measure them, to produce enough for a collection is prohibitive for most people.
It's insane. And you also need to have gone to the right school, been in the right city, been able to afford doing unpaid internships for years. It's extremely prohibitive.
I want to actually even double down again on that, because I think in terms of what we learned then from the last, what we learned from in the last 10 years, and when you look at the photography and even what we now call the creator economy, which is all based on content publishing, when you looked at who controlled the photography industry and where you came from and the internships you needed to do and who you needed to assist to become one of the great photographers, going back 10 to 15 years, you can associate one photographer with many brands, one photographer with many publications, right? Very, very small. And then there's a kind of another circle that's their assistants, and kind of peters out from core capital cities. I think digital fashion has the ability to decentralize that and actually introduce more of a meritocracy in terms of coming to being a designer. And it doesn't mean that everyone's a designer. Even if I wanted to be a designer, I could not do what you do. You have a brain that I don't have, that I respect so much, But I think what it means is those people who do have talent, but perhaps don't have access to tier 1 cities, our formal education, our relationships, are having the privilege of being able to intern for either free or a very low salary. That's a privilege. I think it becomes really, really important because anyone with access to hardware and software and the ability to actually design can become a digital designer. And for me, that's so incredibly important because the more we decentralize, the more we build a meritocracy and a much more accessible community. And I think that's really, really important because all it does is bring more creativity into the world. And my personal belief is more creatives in the world, the better the world is. So, yeah, I feel very passionately about that.
No, for sure. And I think, with Alice, with Psyche, the motto is technology has the potential to be a great equalizer, which is what you touched upon. What are your thoughts on items being produced digitally, never intending to be produced physically? Does that hurt the business or does that create more buzz within the fashion ecosystem?
I think there's not an or here, it's an and. Mm-hmm. I think it's additive, And I think Charli touched on something really important, which was like her digital identity is as important as her physical identity. And I think many of us can actually, although, it's kind of a switch in a mental model to think like that, it's kind of true, right? Think about our Instagrams, think about our snaps, think about, people who are playing on Roblox. Roblox, like every record, it's beating its engagement records, right? And that's like a group of people, a huge group of people, by the way, coming together and communing in a virtual environment. And they're expressing themselves digitally. So I think it's amazing that I can show up here right now wearing what I'm wearing, which is an expression of myself, but then go into another environment and have another version or the same version, doesn't really matter, be who you want to be, of themselves in that space. So I think designers who are not just capitalizing on that, but like creating that, are doing the right thing. And this isn't something that, again, this is a symbiotic relationship. It doesn't need to be mutually exclusive. And when you look at the numbers and actually look at the revenue being produced from those spaces, a Fortnite and just the apparel produced and sold on Fortnite, the revenue in a year is bigger than the revenue of Burberry, bigger than the revenue of Prada, Bottega, Loewe. So it's very real that this is happening. And by the way, many of those brands have collections on those platforms, so it's additive.
And fashion obviously is a form of self-expression, and helps shape one's collective identity. But I think here at Snap we have Bitmoji, which we do collections with anyone from Carhartt to Ralph Lauren, and we've done Nike and Adidas. And through kind of like how we do Bitmojis, we have the collections, but then we also have what we call drops now, which is exactly kind of mimicking real world. Like the sneakerheads who want to get that sneaker and it's only available for one day or 1 week. Are digital goods the next collectibles? Just like how the sneakerheads collect sneakers or collect, a rare Ralph Lauren polo. Are digital goods the next collectibles?
I think, as long as you have flex value, you have a collectible, and there is more opportunity to flex in the digital world than in the physical world. And that only increases as we move into more 3D-based, avatar-based spaces. I think, within Web3, you're seeing that through profile pictures. It's kind of the best example of fashion within the Web3 space, where you're saying something about your community, your net worth, how early you were into the space. It's you either have, I guess, your Lambo in the garage, or you're one that you're showing to people on Twitter every minute of every day. And actually, maybe there's more value in the thing that you're showing to everybody all the time.
And do you think, Charli, wearable NFTs will take over the future? I feel like last year NFTs were kind of the buzzword, and this year it seems to have died down a bit. So what are your thoughts on that? Will they come back, or how will they come back?
So I guess it's separating wearable and NFT. So the benefit of an NFT is that you have ownership over the wearable. You're able to take it into different environments. You essentially have the same certificate of authenticity you'd get if you bought a Louis Vuitton bag. So, do you want the bag with the certificate of authenticity or without it? It has more value when it is authenticated. So that's the purpose of the NFT. NFT for wearables, whether that's physical fashion or digital fashion, isn't going anywhere. It, inherently adds more value to whatever you're buying. I think the issue is that kind of NFTs have become very conflated with the wider crypto and DeFi industry. of which, last year was not a great year for crypto. So there is a lot of abstracting away from the tech that needs to happen. But fundamentally, NFTs and blockchain, operating on the back end around collectibles, fashion, being able to track the life cycle of a product, being able to track sales, being able to ensure that creators get consistently paid royalties over time. It's an extremely positive development.
And, speaking to that too, I'm going to pivot back to AR. I know we talked briefly about when will AR be fully adopted? Again, this is something that, you've been working at for a long time. AR has been something that everyone on this panel, has been, clearly, hitting the ground with. But when will it fully be adoptable to everyone? Because I do feel like there's brands that use AR for online shopping, try on, but do you feel like there's something that needs to happen so it could be adopted universally?
So, the first thing that was adopted was AR face filters, and that was because of the front-facing camera, and everybody had a smartphone. I think, as we're looking to the outside world through our camera or, full body, it starts to become dependent on, what is the functionality of your inherent smartphone camera. If you don't have to go through an app, if it's just part of your everyday kind of engagement with your phone and with the space that you're in, then if you have the option of enhancing that experience with AR, why wouldn't you do that? But I think it has to become a layer on top of what you're doing every day, rather than being a specific thing that you're, very consciously deciding to do, if that makes sense.
And Alice, I would love to, get your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
When it comes to AR being adopted universally.
So I totally agree with Charli, and I would say that I think it's already here. Like anyone who's reversed their car with an AR overlay, right? You see the camera and then it's already here. Every time we take out our phone, I forget the most recent number of smartphones that specifically have it enabled. But if you've got a Snapchat and if you've got an Instagram, it's here. What isn't here, though, is the fidelity in the technology. And I think that probably comes with the next generation of 5 to 6G. I think there's a lot to do with chips that we need to improve. So I think right now, when you look at augmented reality and the overlay that it has to our environment, we're all using it almost every day. And I think that's why digital fashion can get a bit of a bad rap at the moment, because it's kind of fun and it's kind of gimmicky. And in the way that Snapchat had that watershed moment, when you had the vomiting filter, right? And everyone's like, what is augmented reality? But everyone was sending this around. It's here, but there's just, I think we're going to see in the next 5 years a staggering improvement in terms of the fidelity of the technology itself. Therefore, the designs and creations that will sit on top of it. Because if you think about when we all got our first iPhones, it took a minute for the App Store to be released.
Yeah.
And then the App Store was released, and all of these incredible apps that we use every single day was built on top of it. I feel like we're just we're at that point a little bit with Web3, with AR, even with VR, which I know is another subsection. But I think the VR headsets outsold the PlayStations last year, which was kind of a phenomenal thing in itself. So we're at this tipping point, and I think there's going to be staggering innovation around it. But it's all here. Digital fashion is here. You can see that in the numbers when you look at Bitmoji's numbers, when you look at the collections numbers on Bitmojis, when you look at Fortnite's number, and then augmented reality is here when you just look at our day-to-day usage. I just think it's the leap in technology to stop it being a little bit clunky and a little bit cartoony to being really kind of quite beautiful and surrealist designs, which is the kind of what part I'm excited about.
For sure. And what would you guys say is the biggest myth about AR? How, because I do think, sometimes VR, AR gets mixed up, but what is the biggest myth about AR? What are people saying out there that maybe you want to correct about augmented reality?
I feel like people don't know what AR is. You talk about it like it's this very futuristic term. And to Alice's point, you're using it when you're backing your car up and looking at something. It's really I think people freak out that we're going into some other world and they're like, I don't want to abandon my life. And we're like, nobody's asking you to abandon your life in the real world.
It's kind of the metaverse versus AR type of thing.
Exactly.
The metaverse is taking you outside, where AR essentially is just enhancing where you are at that very moment.
Yeah, and I thought that was always a really interesting point of view from Snap and from Evan, was that this is not about changing your state of reality. This is about supporting you in terms of creativity, communication, and your and utility in the real world, in the world you already live in and love.
For sure. And I think, we haven't touched upon sustainability when it comes to AR. And, how AR does help cut that carbon footprint of, being wasteful. If you're trying on a pair of sunglasses via your phone and then you send it to your friend and say, hey, should I buy this? Does it look good on me? They chat back, yeah, it looks great. And then you buy it. And because of the way it looks on you, you're more likely to keep it as opposed to sending it back. What are your guys' thoughts about, how it's cutting that carbon footprint? And should more brands adopt this, technology in order to allow them to kind of be better and sustainable brands for the environment?
So yes, absolutely. Because, as part of my job at Ralph, I ran digital commerce as well. And then you would look at the level of try-ons and you look like what's baked into the cost model of actually running an e-com business. And a huge amount of it is, and the behaviors that people have is order multiple sizes, get it delivered, try it on, send it back. That's detrimental for the environment. It's really, really bad for it. And I think what AR can give you is the ability to try before you buy, right? It's something we're all aiming towards. But I go back to that perspective on when the technology is there, because, I don't know about how you all feel, but it still is really clunky to try it, right?
You have I think right now, I think to your point earlier, when does AR really get adopted in full? And exactly, it's when the utility is actually there. I think right now we have the creativity and the entertainment. And then, like you said, Charli, we have the flex. And what's missing is the tree. I'm very tall. I know that when I shop online, if I go to a website or if I, buy something from an ad, I don't trust that what I look at on the model is going to fit me. And I know I have to try it on. I still feel that way about AR. I think I need to know, I don't know when the point of when the changeover is to when I look at something in the mirror mapped to my body and believe it's a representation of what the actual, clothing size is to my body. But to your point, that's where the technology needs to improve for the utility to click in. And right now it's more entertainment and flex.
Yeah. And, this is question is to Charli too, is I feel like now more universities are adopting AR and they're more in classes, design classes. How do these young designers, use that to kind of, bolster their designs, not just physical, but, using this technology to kind of make it better? Do you feel like more universities are adopting it? I feel like there's more AR classes. Do you feel like this is something that's a trend that's happening now?
I think it's starting to happen from I'm way out of university, but the lectures that I've done, there's definitely a lot of interest in digital fashion and metaverse. I think there is still, I don't know if it's surprising or not, but a bias within fashion towards analog. There's a bit of kind of snobbery around it. So I'd say that on the digital side, you see it, explored more on the marketing and communication side of fashion education. But I think as a designer, if you have the option to not only create a garment, but create an experience that tells somebody the story of how you came to, be inspired and design this piece. For any designer, that's super exciting, right? You want to be able to play and create as much as possible, and that gives you a whole new layer to explore that is not, it's not limited by physics or safety. Don't send your models down the runway on fire, but you can do that in AR.
What?
Yes, maybe that's a controversial opinion. But yeah, you have the opportunity to sort of tell the story in a way that's very difficult to do through like purely a physical garment.
Yeah.
Can I just say a little bit more about that too? Because in terms of the students, one of the most enriching and rewarding, we're like Psyche has just launched, super new, but what we did was release a Keystone collection, which is basically a membership pass into this community. There's 987. And as part of that, we did an application process for emerging designers to apply to be a part of this community without having to go through the mint. The talent that came through from those designers, and that still comes through in the way that they are mixing digital and physical fashion, augmented reality with fashion in itself. And some of them are design students who are, you know, studying this formally, and it is so phenomenally incredible to see, you know. And then on the other side, there's people who are part of the community who are experimenting and have never gone to a design school. And they're sharing things from Snap's AR kit, you know, as overlays onto the product that they've bought, correlated to their PFP project that they're a part of, and like specifically Artifact. And then they're all sharing and talking about how they built it with one another in a Discord channel. And to be a witness to that and to be able to see that happening is, as I said, one of the greatest privileges. Because what the creativity that is coming in this space and that is about to be unleashed is like why I do what I do. So that's just been a phenomenal thing to see. But I agree with Charli, you know, having conversations with some of the schools, sometimes it does become more marketing based, but the people who are actually designing now and are like getting excited about it, it's phenomenal.
To your point of the snobbery, I have to say when I worked at Snap, I was introduced to Charli's work many years ago by Mike, who was the like lovely, I don't want to say, what's the really nice word, like techie guy? I don't want to say like nerdy or you know, but
you did.
I mean, he's like, oh my God, we run this amazing, you know, program for digital storytellers, and you have to meet this woman, Charli. She's an amazing fashion designer. And I sort of like I did every time I got some random person in the world emailing me saying, you have to meet this amazing fashion designer, I would kind of like roll my eyes. But took the call and then was like, oh my God, she's really talented. These things are very cool. That she's really doing something interesting. I think there's a lot to come there in terms of the belief in sort of digitally native creativity. But I don't think it's going to take long. It's funny, I was thinking about the question about universities, and I don't know anything about that. But what I do know is people always wonder, like, what is my job? How did I get the job that I have? And my path has always been very inspired by being the creative person who gets to work with technical people and talk to technical people and communicate what they are working on. Because without creatives, that work is code, that work is never seen, and that work isn't influenced. People don't realize how impacted, like, tech is very creative. Yeah. And it needs, as it comes to life and is communicated, and you see people really run with that in a way that people don't always know is happening behind the scenes, that like there's so much opportunity for interpretation in the code. And that's why platforms like Psyche are really exciting, and Charli's work is really exciting, because the level of beauty and the level of execution, and to borrow your word, fidelity, really brings life to something like that. Like the Psyche brand, I don't know if you've all seen it, but it can stand, the design and the quality can stand on a level with any fashion brand. Yeah, I don't know. I'm so distracted. You just winked at me, and I'm so charmed. I'm like, I've
that was a
lost
thanks.
my train of thought.
That was a thank you. What Keystone holder?
What brands do you think are doing it really well right now when it comes to kind of melding fashion and tech?
Literally the ones that Alice has worked on.
And this lady, you know, like,
and Charli.
I think there's, you know, what I think is really interesting is we're in like the experimental stage, right? And it's kind of been going on for years, right? But there's brands like Charli's, who's built like Restless, are just like, it's kind of baked into their core. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is like big traditional brands will move from experimentation into mass adoption. And that comes at a fundamental structural level, right? as someone who's worked in brands, for it to move from like marketing or digital marketing or social media and innovation team really across the spectrum and verticals that exist in like an enterprise, I think we're like not there yet, but we're getting there, right? I think as part of like at Ralph, like you kind of watch stuff for digital, for the next level, which is like blockchain and really like mixed reality design. I think that still has to move from marketing and creative storytelling functions to like enterprise-wide adoption. And I think that will be the next 10 years. Because I think when you look at like, I was hired as a chief digital officer in 2018, right? So those roles were still important and needed because they were transformation roles. I think it'll be really interesting in the next 10 years seeing what's the role that will be brought in to like do that for Web3, blockchain, wearables. And I think that, because it disrupts everything from the supply chain, right, to marketing, to product development. And I think that will be really, really interesting. And I think if people are interested in the space and considering where to go in their career in the next 10 years, I'd double down there. There's a few of us in the room here that kind of double down in social media, the kind of early 2010s, late maybe 2010. And it worked out, So if anyone's kind of considering, it worked out for lots of people here. But I think for anyone who's kind of maybe starting out and wondering where to go, and if this is something that's interesting, become an expert, study it, learn it, find free resources, do it. Like you learn, personally, I learn by doing. I tried to mint on the Bitcoin blockchain the other day. Oh my, but you learn by doing, right? You learn by doing. Very different to Ethereum and all the other more developed, right? But and Bitcoin, it's been a cryptocurrency, but the blockchain and people building on it is relatively new. But you learn by doing. So that's something I would say to anyone who's kind of starting out.
And Charli, for those that don't know, can you tell us what Restless is? Like, what are you doing with Restless?
Sure. So Restless basically makes it easy for any creative person or brand to be able to create interoperable wearables that can be used in open metaverse, in traditional games, and also have redeemable physicals. So it kind of came off the back of challenges we kept running into with the Charli Cohen brand, where we were doing these awesome collaborations. We had integrations with lots of different games and social spaces, but there was no kind of central way that they were all connected. You'd have like a design, and then it would just be available in all of these different spaces. So with Restless, it basically allows you to create something once, either as an individual, you customize kind of Nike ID style your own wearable, or as a brand, you put together a collection of wearables, and then Restless manages all of the distribution into these different spaces.
Great. Thank you guys so much for joining us for the Future of Fashion panel. If you haven't already, you should definitely go downstairs and really, go to the exhibit. It's really mind-blowing. You'll be super excited. It's kind of like an Alice in Wonderland. And I just want to say thank you to the guests that are here. Selby, who I forgot to mention, Chief Marketing Officer at Bumble. Then we have Charli at Restless. And then thank you, Alice.
Thank you for having
Psyche.
us.
So guys, check them out. They're doing some great things. And again, I know I don't want to sound like a broken record, but these are women who are really taking up space in the tech world. And, that is not something to be shy about. And I think you guys can learn a lot from them. And just thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rajni.